Hello, good afternoon. My name is Igor Lilic. I am the data science lead at Veda. And Veda builds vault infrastructure on Ethereum. We have some of the largest vaults under TVL with some of the biggest partners in the industry. And I'm here to talk about ETH as infrastructure and why everything else is a meme. If you've ever been to one of my talks, I like to give history lessons or do historical comparisons. And we like crypto, we like tokens, we like Ethereum, but honestly, it is a technology at the end of the day, and history doesn't repeat, but it often rhymes. And so using comparatives, historical comparatives, is an interesting way to think about how these technologies evolve. And so, this little penguin here is the mascot for Linux, which is a operating system server infrastructure play. And in 1991, Linus Torvalds, the founder of Linux, he posted saying, "I want to build an operating system, hobbyist project, out of nowhere, no hype, no token, just his community of builders." And as time progressed, more and more people joined the cult. More and more people started building. And by today's standards, it's an overwhelming success. Over 45% of all server infrastructure in the world runs Linux. If you watch Netflix, it'll be Linux machines. If you're on anything, you're probably using Linux. And so it's an infrastructure adoption story from the institutional side. I don't think anyone here, maybe at ETHDenver with builders, people run Linux, but I don't know if anyone's actually running Linux on their desktop. So it is an institutional adoption story. It's not a retail adoption story. Linux was able to win the institutional side without really even scratching the retail side. Okay, so how does that apply to Ethereum? Well, before we go to Ethereum, I want to talk a little bit about Bitcoin. And I've gone back and forth between Bitcoin in my time, but I'm personally ready to call it. Call it for what it is. Bitcoin is a meme token. That's all it is. It's a proof of work fixed supply meme. And my spicy take is it's actually holding the industry behind. And I won't go too deep into why I think that is, but if you catch me afterwards, I'll explain myself. But it is evident that Bitcoin is not a serious place to build. I think if you search something like Lightning Network volume on Google and you get the top result, I think Bitcoin Magazine said in November of 2025 there was $1 billion of volume on the Lightning Network. Like Ether does, hundreds of billions of dollars per month easily. At peak, I think we've done $500 billion, close to it. And so it's not even a comparable. It's not even apples to oranges. It's just Bitcoin is a meme and Ether is actually real infrastructure. And so yeah, I am starting to lean back into my ETH acceleration arc. I won't even talk about agents, but obviously I think we all know agents are just gonna be a thing, and they're gonna be a thing on Ethereum. And I'm definitely stepping into my ETH maxi. I think this is the cycle of the flippening, and I'm not shy about it anymore because Anyways, I'll get off that soapbox. But why ETH? Why am I so such an ETH maxi? It's not ideology, it's engineering, okay? Boring infrastructure sometimes is the most important infrastructure. And there's a couple of components that make Ethereum what it is, right? So first of all, Ethereum isn't one spec. Ethereum is a layered system of interfaces, and interfaces that are open. I've been here for a long time. I was joking. Me and some of my friends are actually in the museum here at ETHDenver when you walk in, the Ethereum Museum. through the process of Ethereum's growth, you could participate in the governance. You can propose things. You can make impact. You can actually create change. It's open. It's an open spec that continuously evolves, which is one, amazing, and then two, like how technologies like this grow. Again, going back to the Linux thing, it was the same thing. Linus said, "All right, if you want to write code, if you want to commit changes, like if it makes the thing better, you know, go for it." The second thing that makes Ethereum a true infrastructure, and especially for institutions, is it might be underrated for those that don't actually like build too often on Ethereum, but on Ethereum you can reconstruct exactly what happened and why. So deterministic execution with full event logging. This is also like why I don't think Solana is a true long-term institutional play. Also maybe a spicy comment, but if you've built on Solana, you don't have the historical record of logs for the blockchain that you can just query on Solana. You can find third-party service providers that give you that data and charge you a fee for it, but you cannot get it natively from the execution environment. And from an institutional perspective, this is a huge deal. Okay, it's a huge, huge deal because when it comes to audit and compliance, et cetera, you need that traceability. So the third thing, it's a native Rails for liquidity. I mean, stablecoins were born on Ethereum. Ethereum created stablecoins. It wasn't Bitcoin. It wasn't Solana. It wasn't anything else. It was Ethereum. And the growth of stablecoins is tremendous. I mean, whatever the price is today of Ethereum, doesn't matter. We're all-time highs in stablecoin adoption, volume, et cetera, and continuously growing. Turns out that liquidity just wants to find places that it can flow. You know, Bruce Lee always be like water, right? Well, if money and liquidity is like water, the place it wants to flow to are the rails that support it, and that's Ethereum. And then finally, yeah, like the open foundation, programmability, you know, the Ethereum Foundation is iterating and going through its growing pains, et cetera, but it has remained an open place. Ethereum remains an open ethos that anyone can build on. Okay, so what are the practical adoption stories for this infrastructure? We're on the neobank meta in February of 2026, right? So the first wave of metas were the exchanges, and then the ETFs, and then the third waves were the DATs. Going back to why I think Bitcoin is holding us back, I think DATs are a terrible idea. Again, not too important for this talk. The current wave is neobanks. Neobanks are emerging, and they're emerging on-chain. So Veda provides infrastructure for all three of these partners. EtherFi, the first non-custodial liquid staking and restaking tool with over 5 billion in TVL. We just launched vaults with Kraken here in January. Our Kraken vaults have steadily increased in TVL, and they're currently over 70 million in TVL in about 3 weeks during a bear market. You know, it's one of the growth stories of Q1 of 2026. And, you know, Kraken is finding their liquid yield products to be a destination for their customers and creating new value for their customers. And Plasma we launched in Q4 of 2025. You know, and this is another example of a neobank. You know, Plasma kind of leans into the neobank meta specifically, but it's one of these neobanks that's using Ethereum infrastructure to build next generation products for their users. And so, you know, going back to Veda and what we do, we are building the plumbing for the neobank era. So we have over 120 vault deployments. We do cross-chain yield routing. We are building compliance-ready architecture with white labels for neobanks, and this is all enabled by Ethereum. And so going back to the analogy, why is Ethereum going to win? Why do I not have any fears about the competitor chains? Why do I not worry about bear market prices? Well, again, you could use history as an analogy. In '91, it was Linux was a hobbyist project posted to a mailing list, and then it took a long time to incubate. A community was building around it, creating patches and new releases, forks. If you want to talk about forks, the Linux ecosystem has tons of forks, tons of L2s, tons of distros, they call them. And it's a healthy competition. It makes the whole underlying infrastructure better to have people experiment and break off the main branch and create their own versions. And, some of them fail, some of them succeed, and that's like part of innovation. But yeah, by '99, Red Hat, which is a very large Linux distribution, packages it, sells it to enterprises, IBM, and by 2010, it just becomes invisible. We actually don't really talk about Linux anymore, even like as engineers. It's just kind of just like disappeared, but it's still massively impactful, and it's just become base layer infrastructure for the world's technology. And my argument is that Ethereum is going to go through the same path, right? So the protocol origins, the white paper, mailing lists. I think back in 2013, 2014, Skype was where everyone was hanging out. There's a lot of Skype rooms. But yeah, we grow up, we go through the incubation phase, the ICO era, NFTs, CryptoKitties. I remember when CryptoKitties came out, the doomers were saying, oh my God, Ethereum can't even handle digital cats or whatever. The cats are clogging Ethereum, like it's a failed project. And it's like, no, CryptoKitties was the first stress test. It's how technology works. Like you need stress tests, volume, to see where the thing falls over. And then you know what you do? You put your head down, you go to hackathons, and you go to events, and you just keep building, and you keep building, and you keep building, and you keep innovating. And, CryptoKitties, rest in peace. Maybe they'll make a comeback at one point. But it was this initial testing ground. And what did we get after? We got the NFT phase 3 years later. And so, we just continue to keep iterating. And by 2024, the spot ETF was approved. In 2015, the idea of a spot ETF was just unimaginable. And then now, we just take it for granted. Of course there's spot ETFs. Of course there's DATs. And of course we can do, we're fighting for legislation. The Stable Act, obviously huge thing. The Clarity Act, currently in progress, will also unblock the next wave of innovation in the United States for crypto adoption. And, at some point, just like we don't talk about Linux anymore, I think we get to a point where we don't talk about Ethereum. I mean, we will, because we're, ETH maxis and we're nerds and we like the culture and, we like the other aspects of the Ethereum community. But the adoptions will just treat it as infrastructure. Everyone will have an EVM indexing product. Everyone will have protocol bindings. Everyone will have, alerting and monitoring and the boring stuff that you have to build for the institutional adoption. And so, if you use Linux as an example, it didn't win with hype. It wasn't about cultural wars and, globe-trotting superstars that are buying, Linux swag and showcase. No. It won by becoming the thing that every institution depended on. And Ethereum is having that moment right now. And so that's it. Thank you.